A martial arts icon gets forever immortalized in resin. Here's your look at the brand new Star Ace Bruce Lee 1/6 scale polyresin collectible statue. From Star Ace Toys, Bruce Lee was the premier motion picture martial artist, inventing his own style of kung fu and popularizing it around the world. This 1/6 scale statue of Lee depicts him in the way of the dragon and features a realistic fabric costume. Lee stands in his classic fighting stance with nunchaku at the ready. This deluxe version of the statue also includes a light-up diorama base. Just before we follow the way of the dragon, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the brand new Bruce Lee deluxe statue stands. I'd like to as well thank the folks over at Star Ace that were kind enough to provide this sample we could have a look at. Depending which direction you'd like to go to get your hands on this, you can either go with the standard release or the collector's edition. The collector's edition here, at least in Canadian prices, is about $520, but will include as well a light-up base. The statue, though, of Lee stands exactly 12 inches in height, or the statue is 30 centimeters tall. Included along with Lee, you did get the following things. First, a front placard that features Bruce Lee as well as the Way of the Dragon. While the front, though, is plastic, painted very nicely outlined here in white, the back, though, is felt. One thing, unfortunately, though, with mine is that there's a little bubble right there, just by the way that they adhered this. I'm going to see if I can try to take this out. Although, to be honest, you're never really going to see it anyways. It's only going to be facing from the front. This does nicely go on the front of the display stand like this. I mean, really being the fact that this is also a separate piece, you could also have it on the side there as well. He does also come included with his nunchaku, or nunchuck if you prefer. This is actually going to be holstered or held in his hand on one side and then tucked underneath his arm and his torso. Going to get to more of that in a moment. And then the last thing that it also comes included with is a power cable. This is the collector's edition, so what it will do is this is going to plug onto the side of the display base and illuminate brightly here in red. The thing, unfortunately, about it, though, is it's charged by USB, which isn't necessarily a bad thing at all. Everything now usually is USB enabled. The thing about it, unfortunately, though, is it doesn't come included with a plug. So if you are one that still likes to plug things into a wall, unless you have a wall plug that already has the USB plugs available, you're going to have to definitely get yourself a plug that goes on the end of it. Because of where I'm working right now, I'm going to get myself, though, a plug that's going to attach onto the end of this. I'll plug this, though, in a moment so you guys can see how brightly that illuminates. Taking only a few moments to take Bruce Lee off his display stand so we can get a closer look at it. While Bruce Lee, though, is polyresin, the display stand isn't. It's plastic. Fairly weighted, too, of course, because it has to have all the electronics built into it. If we flip the statue, though, upside down, at least the display base, we have both the deluxe version there, as well as the signature for Bruce Lee, and indicating that this is the Way of the Dragon release. There is rubberized feet. Normally, I would have said it on the corners of the square, but being that we have a perfect circle, they're in somewhat the corners of that to prevent scratching on surfaces. And if you also as well have the Star Ace logo there down below. If we look at it to the side, though, there is, of course, the plug that's going to accommodate the cable. Now, in preparation of this, I've already taken the liberty of taking the USB cable and taking it and plugging it into an actual plug. Here's the live end of the cable right now. We're going to plug this in place. One thing, though, about this is that there's no on and off switch. The moment you take this and you plug it in, the moment you actually, in fact, see that it makes connection is the time that this illuminates. And it illuminates fairly bright. The thing I like also about this is, while obviously the dragon is all part of the red plastic that's on this, the part that they've actually put over top of as the stencil is raised. It's not just printed in place. So there's some additional 3D look to it. And it does have a very brightly illuminated dragon. You know, though, looking at this, I do wish there was a switch or something on the side, because if you're one that likes to have your statues always on display without always having then to plug this in all the time, had they had just a switch, had they had a little button, for example, you could turn it on and off. So if you never wanted to always have it illuminated, obviously then you'd have the means to turn it off if you wanted to, without, of course, unplugging the cable. Let's get now, though, a closer look at Bruce Lee. Generally, I am quite happy with how Bruce Lee turned out here. Now, he is, though, a polyresin statue that has then fabric over top of it. He has a fabric tank top that can be removable, and he also has himself fabric pants. Everything else, though, is polyresin. The nunchaku that we're going to be coming back to more in a moment will actually then sit inside his hand, and then you'll also see as well, see there's a little indentation here. This will slide in between his bicep and his torso. Head sculpt wise for Bruce Lee, I think they've landed a decent enough likeness for him. It does look like the actor, though I do feel like the head is a little too long, maybe just shortening it up just a little bit. But I think like likeness wise and the way they've painted this is nicely done. It does, I feel at least, definitely does look like the actor. He's fairly lean and mean. Obviously, that's the way that Bruce Lee would be. I think they've nicely captured the sculpting here, even in fact putting in things like veins and the way they've accented really the musculature of his body, which is something that only really then will be enhanced the moment we take his tank top off. To get this off, you would think that you'd have to then try to fight this around his arm and try to fit this over his head. They've actually, in fact, made it a lot easier. If you look at to the side of it, there is a Velcro closure. Holding on to the statue, because the last thing I would want to really do is drop this. Just going to detach the Velcro like this, and then it makes things certainly a lot easier. You're just going to fold this around and then drape this over top of his head, and then you're going to want to fit this over his arm. Now, the hardest thing about this, as I've already done this a couple of times, is getting this around his head. Even though there is really that Velcro closure, the head is still large enough that you have to kind of fight to get the t-shirt around it. Obviously, again, you're doing this, you're probably not going to be doing this more times than one. I mean, obviously, I think when coming to display this, I'd actually like to prefer to display him with the tank top myself, just because I like the look of it having it. It brings just a little bit of additional coloring. But to take it off is definitely one of the benefits of a statue like this, so it gives you two different ways of displaying it. The detailing there is definitely captured there on his torso. Again, there's very little in the way of fat here. The coloring of the actual skin tone is well done here. I mean, there's some additional slightly kind of pink colors that they've airbrushed in there as well. But again, from a likeness standpoint, I think it looks decent enough and it looks close enough looking like Bruce Lee. Now, I did say, though, taking the nunchuck, probably a little easier now to see sort of what's going on here. See how there's like a hole right here that very much obviously outlines where the handle of the nunchaku is going to go. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the one end of it, and you're going to dowel it inside his hand, and then you're going to take the other hand, the other handle of it, and slide it pretty much in his armpit, and then he's going to be holding it this way. Really, without the nunchaku, it kind of does leave a little out of place. Obviously, it looks like he's supposed to be holding something, so it's nice to see that they actually included not only just a nunchaku as part of the displaying, but the fact that also there's a chain connecting the two handles together. Again, it does certainly complete the look nicely here of Bruce Lee, and again, you can still keep obviously the fabric pants on there as well. The tailoring, by the way, is not something really to get a chance to talk about too much when we look at polyresin statues, because generally everything fabric-wise is usually also sculpted in polyresin. But by incorporating more than one medium, I think the fabric is certainly a nice touch. It gives you a natural drape to pants that wouldn't be able to always be successfully accomplished by if you had to have to sculpt it. It does have the belt there on the front that's been tied off nicely. And while the pants obviously here are in fabric, the socks and the shoes that Lee are sporting are also molded here in the polyresin. And those are nicely painted there too as well. The socks done brightly here in the white, the undersole as well. I do like that they've added also a little bit of scuffing, attention of detail that they didn't really even need to put there in the first place. Then to complete, of course, the look, you're going to get yourself Bruce Lee. Now there's a hole right here. Let me show you what I'm doing here. There's a hole right here and there's a hole right here. You're going to align the two pegs, the posts on the bottoms of his feet, to those holes. And then you're going to have to just kind of work your way down until eventually he gets into those holes. Once that's now complete, you can see really how good Lee looks with now the illuminated base. I like the look of Lee. Again, like from a head sculpt standpoint, I feel like the hair is maybe a little too high, but I do think that likeness-wise, it looks definitely a lot like Bruce Lee. And whether you decide, though, you want to display the figure with or without the tank top, I think, though, is still a nice inclusion, because very well they could have just kept the tank top as a permanent piece that you had no choice at all. And, of course, the last thing to finish off this is get yourself a little placard there that can go in the front of it. Yeah, I think, though, when I'm wrapping things up for this review, I'm ultimately probably going to be putting the tank top back on. Even though I think Stargis has done an exquisite job on the sculpting and the detailing for his body, I think I just prefer myself, for specifically this look of Lee, to have the tank top on myself. But I do like the idea that, again, like the display base illuminates. The only thing I would say, though, is being that as a statue collector, and I probably can speak to also other statue collectors out there as well, that having a display base always on like this, in order to illuminate this, you always either have to have this plugged in onto, anything that's USB enabled, or you have a plug that can go into the wall, or you're going to always have to unplug this from the display base to unilluminate, to turn it essentially off. I do wish that they could have had this so that the cable would always be plugged in no matter what. So if you had this tucked away or on a detail shelf or somewhere in far enough away, it's always hard to kind of get access to a cable. Had they at least had a switch somewhere on the side, a button or an actual just on and off switch, then at least you could always have the thing turned on, always plugged in at least, and then decide whenever you want to turn it on and off. The only other thing I would have done differently to the statue itself. I had given you guys 411 earlier in Canadian prices, but for the US collectors out there that are interested to get their hands on Bruce Lee, the difference between the collectors and the deluxe version is $40. The collector's going for $329 US. The deluxe version that has the illuminated display base is going to go for $369. It's exactly $40. So you can decide based on that. The statue's going to still stay the same, but you can decide if you want to have it illuminated, spend the extra $40 and get it in the deluxe version. If you have no plans in mind at all to ever have this illuminated, or you would have like to have it illuminated, just going to be a little bit harder with the way that you've got all your statues set up, opt instead to go with the collector's edition. Either way, though, Bruce Lee looks pretty good. I really like the way that this guy did turn out. The placard is also a nice touch. It's a bit of a shame I had a little bubble on the back of it, but I'm never really going to be seeing it anyways. I'm always going to be looking at, like most placards tend to be, facing forward, never looking back. The additional touches of adding the nunchaku is something that's being removable, although removing it, obviously, you're going to see a very open hole that is in his hand that looks like he's obviously going to be holding something, and he's also going to have a hole kind of in between his bicep and his torso, so it's going to look like it's a little out of place. Obviously, the finishing touches are also as well. You can either choose to go with a tank top or with or without it. I choose with it, but you can also choose to have it displayed without it if you want. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Star Ace that did provide this sample of the brand new Bruce Lee 1/6 scale poly resin statue that we had the chance to have a look in this review. What do you guys think of this? Let me know down below. Is this one that you guys could see yourselves picking up for your statue collection, or is this one that you would see yourselves passing on? Let me know down below. If you guys in the meantime did like this video, want to throw it a like. Why not? If you guys want to stick around for more Star Ace reviews and you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.